Hey everybody, welcome back to Gun Tote Minnesotan. My name is Andrew, and I'm going to talk about the Tract Optics 12.5 by 50 shot glass binoculars. I'm looking right now out of my deer stand. I've got a four-sided stand here. It's really windy. It's actually fairly cold out right now. I'm looking at about 1,000 yards this way, about 1,500 that way, only 100 right here, and 50 or 60 this way. So I've got my 12Xs with me because I don't want to try to lift up my rifle, set it here in this direction, and glass with that single eye on even on 12 power. I don't want to do that aiming at all these things because I've got some sensitive targets in different areas, or I've got things that I don't want to shoot towards in this area especially, and a little bit in that way. And just pointing my rifle around is a little bit reckless. This is safer, and it also is more immersive. I've got a much wider field of view right now than I normally would with a rifle scope. And I know that for a fact because I put it up just a second ago. A rifle scope that's a good rifle scope with a 50 millimeter objective still can't compete with the field of view that I'm getting right here. So looking at 1,000 yards, and a little past 1,000 yards, one thing that I've been testing today is depth of field. I'm really curious to learn more about that depth of focus and what can I tell between brand to brand and optic to optic. And looking at this pair right here, as I'm going back and forth, I've got something 100 yards ahead of me. I've got something 500, 1,000, and like I said, about 1,500 out there. And what I'm seeing is probably a good sign. Here in Minnesota, you might go from valleys and prairies to wooded areas like this, all in the same, run with some rivers around. And that kind of topography means that sometimes you'll be walking in the woods and you'll walk into a huge open area. And when you're looking at whitetail, which is what I'm glassing for right now, when you're looking at whitetail, sometimes you actually need higher power magnification. I know out west, a lot of folks are going to be, gravitating towards something like this. A 12.5 makes so much sense to glass big areas, big mountains, hills, just big country in general. And it's assumed by a lot of people from the west that up north, you don't really need something like that, but it depends where you're at. Actually, in southern Minnesota, there's really big open country, thousands and thousands of open acres because of crops and agriculture. So if you're trying to glass where the whitetail are, or even pheasants for that matter, where they're running around, you can actually use a pair of binoculars with a lot of success. And it's safer, like I said before. Field of view and depth of focus or depth of field is something that's going to matter a lot though. Because like I said, I've got a wooded area right here. Then I can kind of at the same time see 1,000 and 1,500. And with this wide immersive field of view, what I can do is set my focus just comfortably enough that if something walks in here, even at 100 yards, I believe I can tell when it walks in. And there's a little nice buck trail going on right here at 100 yards. So I've got my eye on that. I can look right at it. I can have my rifle ready to go here next to me. But I also don't want to get surprised by something at 1,000 coming around the corner here. So at 1,000 yards, which I technically cannot take this shot, at 1,000 yards, I can still see that pretty well on the edge of this field. And I could tell if something is running this way, and that has actually happened to me a number of times. I've had critters running right from that direction into this area. So I've needed a field of view that could see both things. And then if I want to get really risky with it, there is an opening here. Again, not my property. I can't take this shot. But at 1,500 yards, I can see what's running in. The nice thing is I don't think anybody hunts over that way. So if something gets scared and it's coming this way, I've got a long time to prepare for it to run this direction. I can glass it with this amount of detail. I'm actually looking at some horses right now. With this amount of detail, and let me go ahead and laze those targets really quick. I'm going to see how far away those are exactly. Oofta, it is real cold and windy right now. Okay, so looking at these targets, I just lasered it, and I'm at 883 yards to these horses, pair of horses. Now, I could tell right away that they were horses. They weren't the cows that they were next to. But those horses, I'm getting a lot of detail. It honestly feels like they're only a couple hundred yards away. With a good pair of 12.5s like this, the amount of detail that I can extract from that, if you're doing like a hunting reconnaissance kind of thing and you're trying to find out how many points does that buck have, they're grazing in a field and it's just really far out of touch for the rifle that day, you can still count tines. I would be very comfortable, at least off the tripod, counting tines on a deer this far away. I was kind of hoping there would be some out there today for me to take a poke at or count and put it to the test, but I would be very comfortable going this distance counting tines, which is really impressive. That's a long ways away. That's really far. But I believe there's enough detail, and one of the reasons I think that is how much detail I can see on the horse, in his face, on his feet, his mane, and then the trees that are right next to him. He's walking in and out of a couple small bushes. The amount of detail I can pick out on the bushes tells me if that was a deer there, I definitely could pick out a sufficient amount of detail to see if it's a big rack, small rack, and probably count tines. Now, this isn't the only pair of binoculars that Tract has. Obviously, they have some 8X, 10X, and these 12.5s. And I kind of went back and forth between which one makes the most sense for me. One of the things that I like to do is competition shooting, and very often that's not an obstructed kind of thing. I've got a straight shot to see my targets, and typically I kind of know how far away they are. But with that allows me to use a higher power magnification because I don't have as much obstruction of trees and brush around me all the time. I think it comes to hunting, about half the areas I hunt are wooded, and so an 8X lends itself. I would decide to go with the 12.5 because I think it makes the most sense for me in the majority of what I do, which is competition shooting. If the majority of what you do is more glassing for deer or elk and that kind of thing, I'm going to push you probably more towards the 8 and 10 power for most people, especially if you're in the Midwest. Most people are going to be happy with the 8 and 10X. But if you're a combination person like I am, or you're getting into NRL Hunter, a pair of 12.5s isn't going to hold you back the way that people used to think so. I think the glass quality, the light collection, the materials that are being used with a shot glass, it does really well, especially in low light. And the immersive view, again, just a very wide field of view that these have, it's not holding me back. And I'm able to see a target and adjust my tripod really quickly. That isn't to say that there isn't some stability concern here. With a pair of 12.5s, if something is under 300 yards, most of the time, I want to find something to lean against. I want a tripod with me. If it's just, well, let's say 200 yards, actually more like 200 yards. If it's 200 yards and in, that's a little bit of a shaky image for me, especially if I'm trying to spot something small. The nice thing is, the big pro here is I have a lot of clarity, a lot of magnification to see those kinds of things. But if I'm just holding it with my arms, it's up to my arms to get that stability factor to work out. And so most of the time I end up leaning against something or putting it on something, and that's not too much of an issue for me. I usually make that work. But I like glass like this, to be honest with you, for those further things, 200 plus at least. But man, does it come into its own. When I compared an 8X just a minute ago, an 8X versus these. Now there's an 8X with a 32 millimeter barrel. This having the 50 millimeter barrel and a 12.5. Yeah, it's a pretty big difference. And the thing that's kind of cool about it is the footprint isn't that much more, and it's not that much heavier. Plus, when it comes to low light collection and the actual image during a sundown setting like this, it's hard to beat these. These are just probably superior by far because of that shot glass. Even with a roof prism, I think it uses a Schmidt-Peugeot prism, if I remember right. Even with that, it's pulling a pretty darn nice evening image like what I'm seeing right now. All right, looking at 300 yards, actually 330 from right here. Let's see what that looks like. Go ahead and work the focus wheel a little bit. Got a lot of different things to look at down there. It's not just weeds and target berms. There's quite a bit. I have numbers down there. I've got clays down there. I've got rocks, weeds, usually birds and animals, turkeys and deer. Most of the time down there, tires, white targets, and some squirrels. Yeah, I'm pretty happy with that focus wheel. No problems with that. I wouldn't expect any at the price point, but very happy with it. Looking at edge to edge clarity, when I go to the extreme edges, all the way to the edges, you know, depth of field actually isn't too bad on these. It really isn't. I could see 100, 200, 300, and a little past 300, probably out to 350. And so field of view and depth of field looks pretty good. When I'm talking about depth of focus or depth of field, what I'm trying to say, whether I'm saying it right or not, I hope I'm saying it right. What I'm trying to say is that the things that are in the foreground and aft of my actual target that I'm focused in on are still relatively clear and certainly a usable image. If I was at a competition, which I do shoot here at competition, we don't usually shoot this close, but this area, I have enough wide, field of view where I could get multiple targets in this one static position right here. Yeah, several target berms in the same frame, lots of detail, targets that are closer, targets that are further. They would be in focus, and I would definitely be able to spot impacts, misses in the dirt or vegetation easily at 330 yards. Easily spot misses, even with those little 6mm. Okay, so I'm looking at a little past 700 yards in this direction right now, and there's some chickens out there kind of in a shadow where there's lots of trees, and I can tell that they're chickens. I could easily differentiate even some of their color patterns on them. 12.5 power is easily enough to make out the difference here because I am stabilized. If I was just holding them, stability factor would be lower, but on the tripod, I can pick out those chickens. I can see what they're doing just fine. Honestly, it feels like it's 100 or 200 yards away. It's really bringing in a good amount of light, and there's plenty in the sky left over right now, but that happens to be in the shadow where I'm looking. And I can pick out those chickens just fine. Super cool. So in a hunting scenario, whether you're looking at a fox or a coyote or an immature wolf or a house dog, you need detail, you need to know what you're looking at. And this is going to give enough resolution and clarity and magnification to do a whole lot and get confirmation of your target before you pull a trigger. Okay, so I'm standing in a spot where a lot of deer pass through every year. I might even hunt over there out of a blind in one of the corners of these lots. I've got my Tract Toric 12.5 with me. I've been kind of noisy here, but I haven't scared away some deer here at a little past 300 yards. I'm familiar with these deer. There's a mama out there and there's two babies, and I see them pretty often. I come out to glass from time to time. I'm pretty familiar with this pair now, just because they're the ones I always see over here. And there's a spike. Yep, there's a spike out there. Now there's three. One of the reasons this is really awesome is because I'm past sundown. It's just a beautiful night. I absolutely love it out here. It's past sundown. I've got brown deer with white bellies and white tails, and they're past 300 yards. I'd say it's probably 325, 330 from here. I'm pretty confident, actually. And, oh, there's another one. And I can tell the difference between the brown grass, the brown trees, the hay bales, everything else that's out there, the brown weeds they're walking through, kind of a swampy area right in front of them. I can actually look through and I can see that spike, and I can make him out against the other deer out there. I can tell the difference a little past 300 yards, even in very low light. And I'm sure this exaggerates it. It makes the sky look light. There's no light down here. It's dark. This is prime closing shooting hours right now. Stability factor off the tripod is obviously going to be very high. Now, where'd they go? Okay, there they are. Now, that's pretty cool. So at 200 yards, I have a tree line which kind of veils what's behind it. But with that awesome depth of focus and the main focus wheel, as I'm going back and forth there, I can tell what's happening at 200 yards, but I can also see at 300 yards, and I was able to make out just the tops of the heads walking through this area, because this brings in a lot of detail, and because of those 50 millimeter barrels on there, it's actually fairly bright compared to what I'm, if I was going to try to do this with my regular vision. I have poor vision in the first place, but I can't see out there. I can't see beyond the 200 yards because that veil of trees that's in the way. This allowed me to see deer I normally wouldn't be able to, and potentially could help me get a shot where I normally just wouldn't have it. And this is only at 300, 350 yards, something like that. Very useful. And we're in the woodsy north. We're not out in the open plains of southern Minnesota where you have big open hills, yet I find a lot of value in having a pair of 12.5x binoculars. It just depends where you're set up, really. Yeah, what's funny is it's so quiet out here and it's just such a big open area. I think that doe is looking at me right now, looking right at me. I don't know if she can see me through those trees, but she can hear me for sure. Yeah, bouncing back and forth from 50 yards here to 100 to 200 yards, 300 something past that. I'm getting a really nice image. It is wide enough that I would be able to capture what's going on a pretty wide field of view. Yeah, guys, I'm really happy. I think this is a very competitive image. I do have some other 12.5s coming from another brand. I'm not sure when they're going to get here, but I don't know how they're going to compare against this, because technically I think they're roughly the same design and they're like $800 more. I just don't know how they're going to compete against this. This seems like a really good deal for what you're getting. Again, with the price, there's no middleman. So they found a winning model. I'll just say that Tract has done really well to find a niche in the market here and get people some high value 12.5 binoculars at 50 yards on the KYL. I'm going to try to run it here with the Nevis barrel from Jarvis on a CZ457 action.
Impact. That's an impact. 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 And one more. Impact.
Guys, I've been really happy with these overall. I've said it a million times. I'm probably, fanboy gushing at this point, but I'm just a big fan of the 12.5 power. I'm sure if these were an 8X, I would still be incredibly happy and they would be very practical. One thing that I like about these 12X or 12.5Xs is that I can use them for my channel stuff too, and they're just reliable. They give a really good image. The low light performance, like right now, when I have to record so much of my content for my channel, and then when a lot of us go hunting, early morning, late at evening, the image that I'm getting is excellent. I've got these berms down here. I can see into the berms. I've got another 700 or so yards this way, and I can see into the dark spots really well. And because I spend so much of my time shooting in low light conditions, unfortunately, I don't prefer that, I'm happy to have a pair of binos that are great and they're really practical. I can focus in on those really close targets. I can add an adapter on there, throw it on a tripod, stabilize it. I can record my hunts, whether it's small game at extended distance or big game, pretty close up for me. I can record it all on there, and the image is just really sufficient for everything that I do. I think these are a good buy. I think it's a good deal for what you're getting. I compared these against just a couple other brands that I've been able to look through that are similar, and I gotta tell you, price-wise, one more time, you have to understand that Tract is bringing in probably the most competitive price on the market for the products that they have. You might see a design like this somewhere else, and that's true. I have seen some designs like this other places, but you're going to notice that there's like a 40% increase on the price. And so Tract is a small team. They're a small group. They don't have a huge marketing budget. They don't have a huge presence as far as some of the other really big names that you might hear out there. But I'm going to tell you that I think it's an excellent warranty for binos like this, and I don't think you're going to get a better image just because you went with a name that you've heard of before. This brand is slowly but surely catching on. A lot of people are figuring out, why would I pay X amount for that name brand over there when I could get a pair of these for a few $100s less very often, and sometimes a better design, better image, more functional. So I have these in my car all the time. I'm using them all the time, and I'm definitely taking them hunting. I'm just so pleased with it. Even though it's 12.5 power, and I don't always need 12.5, I would rather have the good image. Okay, it's really windy out. I took a break from the wind, headed inside for just a second, and I want to give a quick shout out actually to Warbird Pro. Thank you for sending out the BT rechargeables here, Bluetooth rechargeable headphones. These have been awesome. Been using them in matches. They're nice, low profile, and actually quite comfortable rechargeable pair of headphones, and I constantly leave mine on. These have an auto off feature, and if it turns off on you during a match, all you have to do is press it again, it's back on. This has been kind of a lifesaver and has probably saved me quite a bit of money because I'm just terrible about leaving my headphones on. So rechargeable makes a lot of sense. But what I want to do is put that aside, and thank you to Sunway Photo also for hooking me up with a few products that help me do reviews on binoculars and things like this. Let me talk about how I have this set up and what I've been doing with it. Okay, so what Sunway sent out was their CC09. Let me come in a little closer so you can see what I'm talking about. All right, so this is just a clamp with an ARCA plate on the bottom built in. You could put on some other things or go 1/4 inch on it. Anyways, it's really useful to throw on a pair of binoculars like this. And if you don't want to use the nose piece, you don't have a proper piece or an adapter to an ARCA plate of some sort. If you can't do that, this is a really easy one to throw in the bag. And then they also sent out this low-level tripod. So something kind of nifty is you can go ahead and put your binoculars into the clamp, into the ARCA piece here, and I'm on that Sunway Photo tripod. Again, this one happens to be the T3620CM. And then if you have an adapter for your phone to record, which I'm pretty sure Tract has stuff like this, I'll try to send a link if I find that out. But if you have an adapter of some sort, you can throw it on your binoculars, you can record your hunt this way. It's extremely effective. The eye box is pretty comfortable on this. I didn't find it to be too touchy. And sometimes what I'll do, just make sure everything is really in focus, is I'll use the left barrel, I'll open that up, I'll focus it right there, and then I'll go back and I'll let my AI and my technology kind of take over to focus the image the best that it can and lock onto that thing. If you're trying to record an elk walking through, you just tap it, hold on to it, lock the image down. Or if I'm target shooting or trying to record a composition, something like that, 12.5 is easily enough. And because of the SunMyPhoto tripod and this adapter, I'm able to use this product in more than one way, which makes me really happy. And I do intend on trying to use these during my hunting season, whether it's small game with some extended distance shots or big game, which will probably end up being a little bit closer. I'm gonna try to record a little bit of my hunt if I get a chance using this setup right here. I do have some tools and locations at my disposal, and I would like to start recording hunts a little more. But this is just super convenient for the kind of things I'm doing right now. And I can still spot through it. I can see on the bigger screen if it's really sunny or I'm having trouble with the height. There's just a lot of adaptability for this. And like I said before, it helps me use the product, which I don't want to have a million products. I want to have a couple good ones. And this combination is a good setup. All right, so I'm just holding my phone for a second. There's some deer at 1,000 and a little past 1,000. And I want to see what kind of image, there's some deer running back behind me. Deer everywhere. I want to see what kind of image I can get at 1,000 on that deer against a brown background. And it's going to take me a second with the focus wheel. But single-handed, okay? I'm one-handed. Stability factor is not that bad. At 1,000, I can see those deer. And after staring at them for a second, I can tell they're does. It did take me a second. I had to look at the head pretty good. But 12.5 power was enough. Here, it's actually 1,030 up to that hill. I could see that they're does. I could tell that they weren't bucks. And so plenty of light collection, plenty of detail. Excellent field of view at 1,000. Looks really good. And the contrast especially, that's such an important thing in low light. There is contrast there. I'm very happy with these. It's great. I hope you don't do what I did. It took me a long time before I tried out anything from Tract. You should try it out. It's a great deal, and I think they're probably, again, a little better than everything else at the price point. That's just my opinion. I can't prove that, but I have looked through a lot of other binoculars around this price point, and usually it's a brand thing where their brand jacks the price up and the glass quality is going to be lower. Plus, I like the features on this one. Something that I think that matters that I haven't always gone through is some of the technical specs, and I'm going to go through those for this right now because I want you to know what you're getting. And if you start to memorize some of those specs or compare these against other ones on the market that are similar or more expensive, it helps you get a feel for how good of a deal these actually are in comparison to some of the competitors. So let me go through some of the technical specs. First of all, these are about 7 inches long. Okay, they are 12.5 by 50. The eye relief is 16.6 millimeters, and the exit pupil was 4 millimeters. Yep, it was 4 millimeters. The eye cups have multiple positions with, I would say, reasonable resistance. Let me explain what I mean by that. The resistance to actually actuate these, it's a little lighter than I like, but it's reasonable. I have some from other brands that are way too easy. These move on me just a little bit. Like especially if they're not fully into the stage, they'll move on me a little bit. I'd love to see just a little bit more tension there. I've spoken with an optics expert, I'll say, and he was explaining to me that it's actually kind of hard to do, and it will increase the price. So lots of brands actually are just a little bit smooth on this, where it would be nice if it had a little more tension. Moving on, the large focus wheel, the actual focus wheel itself, is textured. It's got a good amount of resistance. I like where it's at. I don't have any complaints about that really at all. I think it's good. It's right where it should be. Good job. Okay, and the hinge itself, so this is the hinge. It's decent. I would like to see a little bit more tension or holding power. Right about there is where it usually is on my face. And if I put it in a bag or something, it's going to move. Obviously, every time it's going to get flexed. And I just think I would like it to be a little firmer. So I have to put a little more effort into it to actually get it to arc. So the hinge is good. It seems strong. It doesn't seem weak. It's not overly large. The binoculars are not crazy heavy either. They're reasonable for 12.5s. And the hinge seems like good strength. I would rather have a good strength than getting exactly the tension that I demand or I want in binoculars. I'd rather have the strength just in case something happens. I don't want them to wear out. The shot glass does seem to do well in low light situations. With those big barrels, you know, and ED lenses. I'll speak a little bit about the lenses from what I understand. I think the eyepiece has 4 elements and 6 lenses, and then the objective lens has, I think it's 3 elements with 4 lenses. And it is a roof style prism, Schmidt-Pachon. I think that's how you pronounce it, Schmidt-Pachon. And it's the type of prism it is, and it does a really good job in low light compared to a lot of the binoculars that I've been testing against this one. So I'm reasonably happy, actually, with the light collection and the type of prism that I'm seeing here and the application most people are going to have for this pair of binoculars. Something that I just like absolutely demand with binoculars nowadays, it has a locking diopter. For me, you know, I do share my stuff quite a bit, and every time I hand something to somebody for 10 seconds, they need to adjust it and change it or whatever, and I kind of like to lock it down and leave it where it's at. And so I kind of wouldn't do these binoculars without the locking diopter. I think it's great that they have it, and I would not like them as much if it didn't have it. It's that important to me. As I said, 7 inches tall, 32 ounces overall, so not the lightest and certainly not the heaviest. It does have a lifetime warranty, which is excellent. That's against defects manufacturing, not against you being dumb. Has a magnesium body, and I would say comparatively with Japanese-made optics like this, it's still very competitive against the top-tier Chinese-produced products. I think this is superior. Even if you get a little better price with some of the Chinese-produced optics, these Japanese ones seem better to me. These are better than the Viper HDs as well. That's just another pair of binoculars that I compared it against. The Viper HDs, to me, were not as bright. I don't think the resolution was as good. Actually, the edge-to-edge clarity was not the same between these two. I think these are better. And that's, again, just my personal experience with a lot of one. I've only got one pair of binoculars to test that against, but that's what I saw. It seemed better than the Viper HDs, okay, specifically that model. Overall, what I would say is if you're somebody who's going to be shooting in close hunting situations, go with the 8X. Still get them. Get the 8X version. I think it makes a lot of sense, and it's really not going to limit you that much, guys. A lot of people overdo it on magnification. Now, I like heavy magnification, but a lot of the things that I do involve competitions or further shooting or looking at really far things away. And so for me, it makes sense to have a 12.5, and then I can just kind of learn to deal with it a little better when I'm looking at closer things. I've learned some tips and tricks just recently to manage stability factor. But for most of you, if you're shooting really close, go with the 8X or a 10X. You probably don't need 12X, 12.5, or 15. You're probably good with 8 or 10. Those of you who are out west, though, you know what you need. You have big, wide open spaces, elk hunters, even some places in the south of Minnesota where it's big open prairies, and you're glassing the hills for deer. Yeah, these make a lot of sense. And I would actually push you towards these instead because I don't think it's going to hold you back. Like I said, light collection is good, image is good, resolution is good, toughness is good. They're not going to break in your backpack. I really like them. So well done to Tract Optics with their Tract Toric 12.5 to 50s. These are probably my favorite binoculars I have reviewed on my channel yet. If you like this video, go ahead and like, share, subscribe. Maybe watch one of these videos if this one interested you.